And we are live. Welcome to this latest episode of Totally Unscripted. My name is Martin Hoxie, and as ever, I'm joined by Steve Webster. Hi, Steve.
Martin. Hi, Charles.
And also Charles. So,
hey,
welcome to 2021. It's got to get better, right?
Got to get better. Absolutely.
So we thought, given how terrible 2020 was, we'd bring a little bit of light into all your worlds and share some of the things that actually happened, some nice things within what was G Suite at the beginning of the year.
I think, first of all, absolutely. I mean, we all know 2020 was, let's just say, to be polite, challenged. But some really good things happened for folks that want to build solutions on G Suite, soon to become Workspace as a platform. And so I think monumental things that change really the way we can build things. And so I think it's a great idea to look back, and we've got some really good guests to bring in. So Martin, why don't we bring in some folks?
Yeah.
A little bit of light on what we did and what folks are doing with it.
So yes, we've got I think a stellar lineup here. I think for many of you, you'll recognize a lot of these faces that we got. So on the show, helping us look back at 2020, we've got Romain. So many of you will know Romain. I've previously described him as the Google Apps Script king. I think he was in the beta, the Apps Script beta. So he's certainly quite literally, you've seen it all, Romain.
Yeah.
And kind of in terms of acknowledged expertise, we've got Scott Donald, also perhaps better known until recently as Yagi. Hello, Scott.
G'day, how are you?
Have you on the show? So for those that don't know, Scott is the newest member of the Google Developers Expert family. So I think a well-deserved honor for you, Scott. And I can never pronounce the name of your website.
It's quite challenging for some people. Yagi-san Atade.
Wow.
So you've been hopefully following lots of Scott's posts over the years from there. And finally, but not least, we have Olaf Hubel. So Olaf is Google Workspace Developer Relations Manager. Have I got that right, Olaf?
Yes.
So I guess without further ado, we should have a look.
One thing before we get started, I want to shout out. First of all, we have the newest GD. We have my manager, the oldest GD, who also just had a addition to his family last night. So Romain, congratulations on your baby boy. Literally, to show his dedication to the community and to the technology, he literally had a baby last night, and he's here. Thank you. We adore you're here, but we also think you're a bit mad, but thank you.
My wife did most of the work. Setting the bar really high for all the other new dads out there.
Well, I hope you've got scripting genius in the blood, in the genes. We need to keep that going. So yes, well, at the start of the year, we were G Suite experts and G Suite developer relations people, and I think that was probably, in terms of kicking this off, the fact that we had a whole kind of rebranding for G Suite. We became Google Workspace. I wonder, Olaf, if you can give us any kind of insight to perhaps why that was done, or some of the impact that's had.
Sure. It was a big change, but it was a long time coming, right? G Suite, almost 10 years old. Most products started as single products by themselves, and over the 10 years, they just started growing closer and closer together, and it really became a big suite of solutions. And so at some point, we had to really rebrand it to represent what it actually is, and it really is your full workspace where you can work. On top of that, right at the same time as the rebrand, we also introduced the new Gmail, where we have rooms and chats, Meet integrated, making it easier for you to work, right? And so that was a big underlying idea of why we had to rebrand. Just after 10 years, the growth that this product has had of all the products within it, and then now really for a full suite. So far it's been really good. People were very positive out there on the rebrand.
I think
Well,
I was going to say the hardest problem for most of us, I know in my case, is stop using the old name. I mean, you keep they call it G Suite, and it's kind of hard to get used to it. I think the other kind of interesting thing, especially when we see things like Apps Script, right? That name has stayed consistent. Apps Script evolved, obviously, when it was Google Apps many years ago when it first started out. But I also think the scope of what you can do with the platform has changed as well too. And we'll talk in a second about some of these new kind of solution types that you can build and how that's evolved. So it's been a great culmination of not just about Apps Script anymore too. It's really become wider. And Olaf hit the nail on the head. It's really about a unified experience. It's about this kind of, when you go in, for example, with Gmail, you go in, your chat is there, the ability to have Meet is there, bringing things like rooms together with files and tasks and all this other stuff. It becomes this kind of a new product at the same time as well too. So it was a great idea to kind of really rebrand that entity to show more of what it was capable of. Also, we on the back end side, we kind of cleaned up the SKUs. So for example, now you've got SKUs are more aligned with the way people were looking to acquire the product too. So it was kind of a perfect storm that made good sense. I still start off presentations by saying, I'm going to say G Suite all the time. And 4 months later, I still am calling it G Suite. So I'm always going to be a G Suite developer. But what do you guys think? What's kind of changed it for you as far as what's the overall theme of the way you've approached solutions in 2020 and look to in 2021? Anybody?
I don't know. Before that, I was having a bit of a look online to see how well Google Workspace was picking up compared to Google Suite on the search engines, and there's just these last few months is starting to get a bit of parity between the two. So I think the names is getting that pickup, which is quite promising, and the vernacular with my clients now are starting to use it a bit more too, which is quite good.
Scott, have you found you've had to do a lot of re-educating, or have people kind of picked up the change from kind of divided tech media?
Yeah, I'd rather not sort of do the re-educating and hoping it sort of appears organically, and I'd sort of use it in my conversation, and then it's getting adopted along the way. But yeah, it was good to see yesterday doing the comparison between the two with the search hits and seeing that they are starting to come together, and yeah, it's good to see the change.
Personally, it kind of caused controversy at the time, but I really liked the new look, and the icons were all rebranded. As you can see behind me, big fan.
Yeah.
So
it always takes a little bit of time to get used to.
Yeah.
Now everyone pronounces Workspace and not Workplace.
It's funny, Martin. You brought up the icons, though. Most people really got the name.
Yeah.
A lot of people wrestled with the icon change, and I didn't get it. I love the new icons, but a lot of people are like, but the icons are hard to get used to. Like I look, and I see when I drop down, the little, the icon there, and picked up. I didn't. No, I love the new icons. I thought they looked great, and it was funny how a lot of people. I think it was again just getting used to it, or 10 years of staring at the old ones. But we got more blowback for that than anything else. Which is really shocking.
Well, the annoying thing is I've got to change all my slide decks. Come on, people. I've got old material. I don't want to refresh it.
Yeah, we had to go through a lot, like the developer site. We had to go through and obviously replace the content in the site. If you notice in the URL when you go to the developer site, everything from Workspace will redirect sometimes to G Suite, so the name is still viable in a lot of the documentation at the URL site, but we got it all inside the product. But it takes a little while. People get used to it. We're still Apps Script underneath the core as far as developer language, but I think it's just one of those things that people adjust to.
Talking of developer language, so a big announcement. I think this was an incredibly welcome development for Apps Script developers. was the V8 runtime. So this put us on parity with a lot of our, well, JavaScript developers. We've got a modern syntax. So I think that was a great development. So in terms of kind of impact, is anyone kind of still wrestling with that, or any kind of highlights or insights you'd like to share?
Well, on my side, I discovered that it's now way easier to onboard developers on Apps Script, especially young people going out of dev schools. They are used to code in modern JavaScript, and before it was super hard to show them the greatness of AppScript if they were struggling with things like, oh, the code that usually don't work in that platform.
Yeah, I mean, so when we released in 2009, right, we were based on ES5, ECMA 5, and that was state of the art at the time. And then literally hundreds of millions of scripts were produced, and we had to keep them running. And right, so for us to kind of change the engine on the airplane in mid-flight was kind of hard. And so, as you guys know, it took a while for us to move from Rhino, to ES6 and the V8 engine, because we were afraid of what it was going to break. In the end, it became one of those, Y2K problems where everyone was afraid, but nothing broke. It just kind of worked, and you can kind of run your code in either or leave it in the old one. It obviously defaults to the new one if you build a new one, or it'll stay with the old, which you can adjust in the manifest. But we found about well over 80% of scripts will run either or, which is neat. So there's not a lot of migration to do. At some point, and that could be as soon as the next few quarters or a little later, we will deprecate the old Rhino ES5 version. But today, your code just runs, just works. One of the things I'd love to hear individually from the GDEs or, Olaf yourself, what did you see was the biggest kind of enhancement or change moving to the new version? Besides, obviously, the fact knowing that it's more modern, but was there anything that stood out? Was there any technology? I mean, for me personally, it's less codey. You can do things more efficiently. You can do it more logically. Cleaner code, you can write cleaner code. You're not stringing variables along and stuff, and you can actually make your code more readable. Those are my highlights. What stands out to you guys? Like, what was the fave feature that you found going from the old one? And let me two-part that. Is there anybody who still writes intentionally in the old version? Is there anybody you hear who really loves the semicolon and can't get away?
Well, for me, it was kind of like I've been using the Rhino for so long. It takes me a little while to rethink, right? So, yeah, it took a little bit.
Yeah, I think it might be. Sorry, Scott.
You're right.
It may be a bit difficult for developers who have very big app script projects that are hard to migrate to V8. For those people, they might want to stick to the old syntax because they cannot change easily. But for all others, it's just even if you don't use all the new features provided by V8, at least the fact that you code in the same way other people actually code nowadays is just way better.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott?
Yeah, I think for me, I put a post out to my readers at the start, and I was really concerned because my audience is usually with a beginner group, and I didn't want to make too much of a transition into code that they're not familiar with. So I said, guys, do you want me to stick with the Rhino typical old coding, or go with the new ECMAScript 6? And that's where they wanted to head. So it was good for me because I was excited about it, and they were very much behind learning the new format and running with that, and arrow functions and template literals and default parameters. It does make things more elegant, and a big performance boost too.
For me, it was a lot of the time when I'm coding, I'm hitting Stack Overflow and just looking at JavaScript solutions for moving data around or arrays. And as Stack Overflow JavaScript tag, it was more and more modern syntax. It just wasn't. It's like I'm having to find the old way of doing it. So it just makes a lot of the Stack Overflow snippets, pure JavaScript snippets, a lot easier for me just to pick up and drop in. So, but for me, where it really came together in terms of the V8 stuff was getting the new IDE, which I think probably takes us on to our next topic. So obviously this came a more recent development, but a very welcome one.
Later in the year, around December, we rolled this out, and as you guys know, as being GDEs, both were a long time coming. Kind of big releases, change your engine, and then change your UI at the same time. And the team got it together, I think, in a big deliverable way. If you saw our show end of last year, State of the Script, where Keith Einstein joined, we actually showed off the new IDE. A lot of us have been using it since it was in even alpha. A lot of folks on this call even. I know as of this week, I understand we're 100% worldwide rolled out. At least that's what I understand. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure everybody has it. So for me personally, it's made a world of change. It's just made it so much easier, so much more pleasant. I had nothing against the old IDE. Steve, like you mentioned, you kind of get used to it, and it's kind of, it's if someone gives you a manual tool, you keep working with it until you get the electric tool, and you don't know how to go back. It's the same thing. I have a tough time going back. There's so many things that are just interesting about it and game-changing about it. Everything I've heard so far is positive. There's a few things we'd like to tweak, but for the most part, I think that might have been one of the biggest game changers, well, definitely for 2020, but really, frankly, in a long time. So what do you guys think? What's your favorite feature? What excites you about the new IDE?
Well, I'm interested to hear from Romain. You were there at kind of the Apps Script beta, 10 plus years ago. So are you still are you mainly developing in the IDE still, or are you a Clasp user dabbling in IDE?
So I was never a hard Clasp user. I used it for some projects, but usually I prefer to code in the IDE online just because it was easier to directly run a function, try it out, access the logs in the next tab because logs weren't as beautifully integrated in the new IDE. And so I was used to play with a crappy IDE. And since I've been playing with the new one, it's hard to, as some features haven't been integrated yet in the new IDE, sometimes I have to switch back. And during those times, I really see the difference and how, and everything I've gained with the transition. And I created a lot of code libraries over the years, and those libraries were already lacking good autocomplete because the old IDE and the old libraries were only allowing small autocomplete, which was not super great. And now I started to rewrite all my libraries to benefit of the autocomplete in the new IDE. And it's just way easier for other people to start using those libraries because when you have all the documentation accessible in the autocomplete, it's just way better.
That's great to hear. I wasn't actually aware that the new IDE supported deeper autocomplete with libraries. So that's one for me to take away as homework.
Yeah, it's basically any JS doc you put in your around your functions will be analyzed and reused in the autocomplete.
That's neat. That's neat.
Yeah, what I liked about it, it's more the one-stop feel. It's more smooth of going to here and there, where before it was more awkward or jerkiness navigating. Now it's more smooth. And then from the early feedback, I've heard people saying, well, how about those nice Chrome extensions? Well, there's been progress with those too for those who wanted to work with repositories like GitHub. So that's been improved. And folders and things like that. So I think it's a nicer environment to work with now.
How about you, Scott?
I think the console looks a lot nicer. You can see how it's running just right on the screen, and it comes up with your autocomplete is a lot tidier, especially when you're moving on something. Front end when you've got your HTML there and it's auto completing that as well as also your Google Apps Script. That was a big boon and keeps me away from being on Clasp and it keeps me straight on the IDE, which is good.
Yeah, you mentioned you work with a lot of new users. I mean, clearly one of the design goals of the development team was to make an editor that was more approachable, right? I mean, the old one kind of didn't flow as smoothly as Steve mentioned. It didn't kind of have that approachable feel. And don't get me wrong, there's still a learning curve, and that's why folks like ourselves are gainfully employed. But it's definitely easier, especially I think my big thing is the documentation. When I learned, I was constantly going back and forth to another screen to figure out how to use all the different objects. And now it's as you type, it is there. It tells you, it shows you. I know a lot of folks would like to be able to either move that or change that or turn it off so it doesn't overly invade the space. It is something we're looking at. But to me, and I'd love to hear from you, Scott, what do you think the learning curve difference is? Is it a monumentally improvement onboarding, or is it incremental? Like what's the feedback you've got from students and from new folks?
Yeah, I think that the documentation is a huge game changer now. Usually 90% of the job is this guided discovery through the documentation. Everyone's terrified of going onto the documentation website or just could not be bothered, but it's right there in front of them. And so it's sort of cut a lot of the questions off to me now because it's all in front of them, which is good. So they can get on with the job and move forward with whatever project they're planning. I think that's probably the biggest game changer for the brand new user, especially when they've got their macro for the first time and they're looking at what they've just created. They can just click on the function and they can see the instructions and how it's working. I think that's probably the biggest game changer for the brand new user.
That's awesome. Hey, I want to try something really dangerous while we have Olaf here. The 4 GDs chime in. We know it's a monumental advance, but what should we do next? What would be the next? And what would you like to see? And I know a couple of folks are leaning towards certain things. Also, if you're listening in, hit us up in the chat, ask us a question, or put it in the comments. What would you like to see next? But Martin, Steve, Romain, Scott, real quick, pick if you had $1 to invest on something new, what would it be? What would it be? Don't say it's perfect. We know it's.
Romain, do you want to talk about deployments?
Yeah. Deployment, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, frankly, the new deployments aren't perfectly finished as of yet, but it's not an investment. It's just we know it will be fixed to perfectly work, but the new deployment as it is today, as it will be once perfectly tuned in, will be way easier to use than before, without any thing missing.
It's great to hear how positive everybody is about it. I see some positive comments coming online as well.
Yeah, Daniel loves it. He's using the new IDE. Using VS Code in class less and less. So there you go. Yeah. Martin, come on, I know you're not unbiased. Martin, what's the next thing you want to
I'd like it to be, and we touched upon this when we spoke to Keith, is just, I think, easier for us as a community to extend the IDE. So either, an add-on framework being made available, or, is based on VS Code and kind of the engine behind that, which has a whole community kind of extension facility behind it. So I think for me, it's been great to see things like the GitHub Assistant, or the Gas Hub, I think is the short term for it. So, which is the one that Steve mentioned. So this is a Chrome extension that gives you GitHub integration. It's nice that that's been possible through Chrome extensions, but I'd rather it to be in the product where I could select, add GitHub integration to your IDE project. So that's where I put my buck.
It's a good question. I'm thinking, since I do a lot of add-ons, we did have a surprise announcement in 2020 with the card builder. So if we think about the new type of add-ons, I think it'd be nice to expand on that. I think it's a very helpful tool. You drag and drop, and then copy and paste the code in. I think it's a big win.
Absolutely. How about you, Scott? What's your one new desire?
I think it was deployment again, but I think, like Romain said, it's underway. It's getting improved and better each time. So once that's sorted out, I would be very happy. And then with what Martin said, it's almost like a Visual Studio Code, and people intuitively expect that there's add-ons there now. So maybe if we can get around that, but that seems like a very big project for the devs. So that might be a long way down the pipeline, I'd imagine, Olaf.
Yeah, but it is something we're talking about. Just to wrap up this topic real quick, I know, for example, feature parity with the old IDE, so all the publishing mechanisms, that should be soon here, very soon, Q1-ish soon. We need to get to that done before we deprecate the old one. The ability to put add-ons is something we're actually trying to figure out. Do we extend it? Does that make sense? What's the demand for it? So I'm glad you guys mentioned it and we heard it. And then we know that obviously managing code and reusability about code is a key initiative that we're looking at in 2021. I want to segue for a second to something else that was really new. I know a lot of folks tuning in, and everybody on the call is an expert in Apps Script or has some affiliation with Apps Script. But one of the big pushes for us is folks that don't know, right? We know there's a learning curve. We know it's hard. And for us, a lot of ways, refocusing on the citizen developer, 2020 was a big year for that. So back in, I believe it was February, maybe it was January offhand. I can look it up. Let's see, when do we get, it was January. So about a year ago, we acquired AppSheet, which is a low-code, actually no-code solution. And then also, subsequently, we had a show right before the break for the holidays on tables, which is another entry that really makes it easy to build solutions without writing any code or very little code. So specifically AppSheet, again, been about a year. Olaf, I know you're a super huge fan of AppSheet. I also know you're a super huge fan of less code is better code. What's AppSheet for us, and what's it been like, and where do you see that going?
AppSheet is just a great tool for no code, and yes, I'm a big fan of no code, low code. I really like AppSheet because it just allows you to quickly take what applications you already have and then extend them. I really like what they're doing around automation around it. So the new directions that they're pushing that in. I know you had the speaker on one of your other shows already, so you walked through most of those things. But that, to me, is just those things are really, really nice. So it's at the end, I'm all about productivity and helping like the citizen developer or the pro user, as you like to call them, or different names people give them. But how do you make people more productive and be able to extend our tools so that they can really work within their enterprises and companies and just really get value out of the apps that, are smaller scale things within a team or very regional or something like that, like things that we don't build within there. And that's why I love that, we have a platform that can do that, and AppSheet just really works on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, spoiler alert, We are working on an upcoming episode where we show how Apps Script and AppSheet can work together. So if you're interested in that, let us know in the comments, or if you want to hear more, tune in for that. Steve, I was actually at your company's event when you had a session last February, which I think was, as far as I know, one of the first publicly shown version of AppSheet as a Google product. And I remember you were talking about it. You had a bunch of folks in the room interested in it. I know you work with a lot of customers. Steve, what have you specifically seen momentum over the year? What have people been doing with AppSheet? What have you heard? And I'm going to ask a funny second part of that question. Have you seen use cases where AppSheet has actually superseded opportunities for using AppScript? Have you actually leaned on AppSheet more in some use cases? What do you think?
Yeah. The whole citizen developer is interesting. So if I can speak to the enterprise level type of customers just for a moment, one point is if you have the upper level of licensing, AppSheet is included. Right. It's like unlimited sort of thing. The other point that I believe we talked about a little bit in 2020 as well, Charles, was wrapping a policy from the IT perspective. Because otherwise you're going to have chaos if everyone's doing different variations and types of no-code development. So for example, it kind of makes sense in this to say, from a policy standpoint, let's use AppSheet. And when you use AppSheet, let's follow these type of guidelines. So we don't have such chaos and supporting within the organization. So I think that's worth to mention that as well. And as far as answering the question of, let's kind of call it scalability. With AppSheet, you can use it as a prototype. Then, as it was mentioned, I think in our discussion we had in 2020, those prototypes become permanent because you become a fan, right? You can easily go from like a spreadsheet as a database and then maybe convert it as you scale to a regular SQL type of database. So there's room of scaling starting with the product, and you may just stick with it. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So Romain and Scott, specifically, you guys write code for a living. How does a no-code tool fit into your repertoire? Like, have you embraced it personally, or are the use cases not sophisticated enough for some of the solutions you build? What's your thoughts behind the tool?
For me, I haven't touched it yet, so
fair answer.
I'll leave this one for Romain.
Yeah, it's so I try to use it a bit. I saw how easy it was to create a nice form to let people enter data and then display all that data in a way more beautiful than in a spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. The fact that it's mobile also is very nice. So it doesn't answer any need, but if you need to simply create a quick database where that people will need to access in a nice way and interact with in a nice way using kind of a form, it's a super great tool. But yeah, that's a usual. Yeah, I mean, I'm an AppScript expert. I have enough work with that, so I didn't have to invest a lot in building things with AppSheet.
Yeah, and one of the things I always say, I totally get your standpoint. One of the things I always say is I am a solution developer, not a code developer. I want to solve problems. I don't care how I get there. And we all know the less code you write, the less code you have to maintain, which I think is great for businesses. I think you're going to see, especially now that it's been moved into workspace SKUs, it's becoming part of the team, it's becoming more important. You'll see how we expand it, and also, like I mentioned, again, spoiler alert, we're looking on an episode on how you can actually use AppScript with actually going forward. And I think again it'll be one of those best of breed for no-code solutions, but not the end-all be-all. But I think it's going to have some great opportunities for folks, especially, frankly, less technical, or for solutions that are need less scale or less length, or need to be done faster, quicker, and whatever. So the AppSheet team itself has seen some just phenomenal embracing of the solutions. Obviously, before we acquired them, but since they've joined, so much more. Martin, have you played much?
I played a bit, and I think for me, kind of the pitch I'd give to developers to if you've not had a look at it yet, to go and look at it is AppSheet has a number of kind of built-in functionality that you could maybe code in Apps Script, but you got things like easy location, signature, QR code scanning. We've seen similar Apps Script projects. I've seen a couple of QR code things, but to have something that's drag and drop native, you're picking up these features. And I think Charles has mentioned we're hopefully going to do a show where you integrate with Apps Script. You can already integrate. AppSheet has webhooks, so you can publish a web app and start interacting with your Apps Script projects there. So if you're looking for an easy way just to grab signatures or something, as a solutions developer, I'd be looking at AppSheet to do that, and then maybe dusting a bit of Apps Script on top if it wasn't doing it all for me.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing about the webhooks. Like, AppSheet actually gets a lot more advanced the deeper you get in there, right? It starts with this simple thing where you I have a sheet, I want to show a form. And yes, there's a lot of value to that, and there's a lot of scenarios where that is super useful. But the second you start playing with it, you start doing the workflow rules and things like that. And then if you put a webhook in a workflow rule, you quickly end up with really cool solutions where you didn't have to write any code yet, and they're really advanced.
Yeah, I mean, your time to app with AppSheet is super fast, right? We all know your time to app with AppScript. You're going to write some code, and you've got to, have some background, or at least experiment or play with it, or take one of Scott's courses, or find a library that remains already built, or hire Steve, whatever the case is. So I think the beauty of it is that, again, it really does widen the door for folks that want to build solutions. And I'm super excited to say it's part of the Google Workspace solution developer platform, right? It makes great sense. Quick pivot. Another interesting tool, though, to move along, also introduced this year, which again, I believe was around the September timeframe. We actually did kind of an alpha beta preview from the Area 120 team, something called Google Tables, which again is another no-code, low-code, interesting solution, which we also did a show back in December. We had Carlin come on, amazing demos with Ben Collins. And I'm blown away by it because, again, it's more than a spreadsheet. There's a lot more ways of manipulating multi-relational database type concepts with webhooks and workflows and some really cool tools. It is not part of the Workspace family yet.
Charles, we even got in trouble for calling it Google Tables.
Right, because it's...
Remember that? We had to call it the Tables beta.
And again...
from something.
I'm really jealous because I'd love to see it join the family. The reason the Area 120 team pushed out there was they wanted to see, was it viable, what people thought of it, was it useful, should it be a product? So let's just do this super fast. If Carlin's watching, real quick show of hands from the experts. Should it be a product? What do you guys think?
Yeah.
2, 3. Top guys, so the bottom guys still thinking about it.
At the very least, it needs to get to Australia for us to play with it.
Right, I forgot. You got that's right. So for folks that aren't US based, unfortunately, the preview is not available because of data security protection rules. But so that's I apologize. I forgot you guys hadn't played with it.
But having seen Carlin doing his demo, I defy anyone not to want it after that.
Well, if you watch that episode,
pretty enticing.
If you watch the episode, I think it was that episode from sometime in December timeframe. I was blown away by the demo. I've used it internally. We have teams using it internally for apps already. Again, just to kick the tires and see where it lands. We don't know if it's going to become a product. But I think people, again, they see this the beauty of doing way more than, managing data in a spreadsheet, but doing things interestingly with it. And it fits, I think, well into, again, that citizen developer space to allow you to create solutions without having to reinvent the wheel to write a lot of code. I mean, how many folks here have written Apps Script behind a spreadsheet where you've built a database model and you've manipulated it? You end up inserting and deleting and updating rows, and you're writing lines and lines and lines of code. This does it for you magically in a UI that actually warrants that experience. And so I'm excited about it. I'd love to see it happen. But when you see, and Olaf jump in here, citizen development and making it easier is really one of the big design goals, whether it's new category applications like, AppSheet and hopefully one day tables. But also, our team and the product team are really talking about how do we make, Apps Script for all? How do we make automation for all? How do we make solution building for not just, experts that, spend years and years, but for anybody who wants to build something? And that's a key initiative for us. And we're trying to figure those things out.
Yeah, personally, I'm most interested in, I'd love to hear people's feedback on that as well. Like, what is the journey from no code to low code to pro code, right? And like, I love to take people that have never coded before, but love working in Workspace with their documents and things like that, and now want to start extending it. Like, how can we get them into a no code tool and then slowly teach them what they can do so they can start doing some basic scripting, or we start teaching them some concepts of how to connect to a webhook or like do things like that. And then how do we slowly get those people into pro code so they can actually start building full-blown applications? Like that is my passion, really is about figuring that out. Like, how can we make those three worlds like seamlessly grow together?
Yeah, and as we mentioned when Keith was on and we did the State of Script show, we've seen exponential growth in people creating app scripts, and we find a lot of them are new people, a lot of them are curious, a lot of them are coming from the macro recorder, a lot of them coming from solutions they find in the solution gallery, a lot of them are finding work that you guys have done online and posted it, and there's a great excitement. But as we all know, not everybody is overly successful in completing that journey or doing it. And again, we're trying to make this easier and simpler on how people can be successful. So stay tuned, folks. That's something we want to work on. Definitely want feedback on how do we as experts help other people be more successful.
Just to add to that, I think Apps Script is a great product in terms of bringing no coders into the coding world. It's definitely where I started. Unpicking Romain's Event Manager tool from 2011 or 10, and just picking. I think for me, the really nice thing about Apps Script is you get reward very quickly. So, in a couple of lines of code, you're doing stuff, you're interacting with big Google products, which I find still to this day thrilling. It's, to generate a map in a line of code is just something magical about it.
It absolutely. Hey, awesome segue here. One of the other big releases that we really built on in 2020 was add-ons. And so, folks that don't want to write a solution or don't have time to solution can go find a third-party solution or hire an expert to write an add-on and something building. And we happen to have one of the most prolific add-on writers here with us in Romain. And so I know you've been building them for a long time. But for folks tuning in for the rewind, kind of the big thing in 2020 was the new Google Workspace add-on model, which allows you to build an add-on that runs across Gmail, Drive, Calendar, and now all the editors, so Sheets, Docs, and Slides, where you can write code once, deploy once, actually create different type of functionality for all those apps, and build it with a new card builder UI metaphor, which allows you to do it in a very more structured, very more polished, easier, frankly, a lot less code way to do it. And that's all brand new in 2020. Really opens up a lot of doors for new types of development. Romain, I'd love to start with you on this because A, you've played with the new one, B, you've written some of the most famous add-ons ever released before. What has that change meant to you, and what can you tell us about those innovations?
First, it was really great to see add-ons leaving the editors area and going to Gmail, Calendar, and Drive. It's very interesting to be able to do interactions with files on Drive, and also super useful for a lot of people and also companies to interact with emails, especially companies who had Outlook plugins and so on. Regarding the development of add-ons now, I think the card service, it gives you, of course, it gives you limitations compared to the HTML service. But what I found is that in terms of user experience, the constraints brought by the card service actually, well, you're forced to build a better user experience, because you cannot do super weird things that you could think are great ideas, and you can do them because with the HTML service you can do everything. And now it's super strict, but the fact that it's strict does help you build, yes, something way simpler and actually answer the same purpose, but easier for users.
So safety was one of the reasons why obviously we went with the Card Builder service. We also wanted uniformity and to make people with more consistent developer experiences. But we also opened up some new opportunities. For example, now you have a home page. Now you have the ability to navigate cards, which again, doing that in HTML service would have been a lot of work. Have you changed kind of the metaphor of the way you're building your add-ons, or has that enhancement helped? I mean, for folks tuning in or may not know, I know you're working on a product called Mergo, which we'll give you a little shout out there. Are you changing the way you're approaching building that? Is there nuances you couldn't build before in the old service that you're able to do in the new one?
I don't think the card service or the new, well, one thing that's definitely changing is, of course, that the same add-on can live both in, for example, a spreadsheet and Gmail, or spreadsheet and maybe Drive and so on. That's a great plus. For developers, in terms of visibility, the fact that it's visible in the sidebar and not in the add-on menu does help. I don't know how helpful it will become once users start to install a lot of add-ons and the sidebar get crowded, but for now, it's definitely a plus. In terms of features, you don't have access to new APIs or whatever, but yeah, it gives you an easier way to build a easy to use interface for users. So it's easy to code for the developer and easier to use also for end users.
You bring up a great point. I mean, first of all, again, we talked about security. We limited scopes because the demand on businesses make add-ons safe, right? You don't want open scopes. I mean, add-ons we wrote years past that had full access to your inbox were probably not a good idea. And so having context, having a limited scope, having that was one of the key initiatives. But you brought up another fact I think which is amazing about it is before you've seen how you go into add-ons, you go tools, add-ons, and there'd be a list of all the add-ons you had. They weren't discoverable. You had to go search for them as the user. But now as an admin, I can deploy that to users in my organization, and it shows up in the panel on the right side of something, say like Gmail, where there's some first-party built-in ones like calendar or tasks or even maps now. But now there's an icon there representing all your third-party ones right there. So you're really easily discoverable, and I think it's going to actually help users find add-ins better than before. Because one of the problems before is just awareness, right? People, I have an add-on. I didn't know my admin installed that, except for I get a little pop-up when I first log in the first time it happens. But now I think it's going to be more discoverable. You put your little icon out there. I think it's great. You set up, you're along right there with first-party ones, which you're in the product, you're in the UI, which I think is a huge enhancement. But I agree with some of the limitations you said on how do I actually, build richer UIs or flow more. There's a little bit of a trade-off there, but so far my experience, and a bunch of folks on my team, in fact, I built an add-on, and Olaf and Steve from my team actually picked apart why I actually built a better add-on with the new one than I did with my prior add-on that I was in love with, and they showed me that I was actually wrong and more efficient and safer, and so it was a better experience for me. Open up to the other guys. Martin, Steve, Scott, have you built a new add-on with the new model? What's your impressions? What can you tell folks why it's something that 2020 really gave us that was great?
Sure, I guess I'll go next. So yeah, I had this add-on that was Google Sheets, so it's one of the editor add-ons. And so I took it upon myself to convert. So I went through a lesson learned there. I actually have a slide deck. I guess we could share too, not screen share, but maybe in the chat here. But anyhow, my experience was I liked the idea of spending less time coding UI, going from maybe 1,000 lines to a couple hundred. Was great for me, but I had to rethink the structure and look at the documentation for the guidance recommendations. So that was very helpful. So I like the experience. And now, as kind of like Romain pointed out, even though I did that for Sheets, if I have this topical add-on that says, hey, I want to clean up or remove something, why can't I not clean up something in Drive? I can do that now. It's an easy addition to the same source code. So I really liked it a lot.
Awesome. Scott, any thoughts?
No, I think this would benefit for another Totally Unscripted, to be honest. I had a look at card services and thought it might be a good idea to update two of my add-ons, and it's something I've got planned for April, but I've put aside until then. So hopefully before then, Totally Unscripted will have a card service series.
So super great segue, and again, you get the right guy on the call to talk to, and Olaf, because one of the things that Steve on our team is looking at doing is, I think I flashed the card builder tool back when Steve actually was on the show, and I talked about it. And it's not officially a supported tool that we're working on, but it's something we're talking about. So again, if you have Olaf down here, you can actually ask him, and if you're in the window, chat in and say you want the tool that builds the UIs to make add-on building easier. Olaf is the guy to tell. He's right here right now, so guys, tell him that you want that tool. I try. He doesn't listen to me. No, it is something we're working on. You want to expand on that? Yeah.
It's a great shout out, and actually for anybody for comments as well. Like anything that we can do, right, to help developers build on our platform, please let us know. That's why I love shows like this. That's why I love the GDEs. Like it's so nice to get feedback. It's so nice to get real world impact, right? It's one thing for us to come up with stuff. It's always harder, right? Like if you're not the person day to day actually building those things for a living. So I'd love to hear your feedback. Love to hear any feedback from anybody on the site.
Yeah. Sorry. It's happening. It's happening. Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Well, I think that was my experience. Yeah, I can completely agree with the comments about it. With the card service, it's a lot easier to build UI. You're spending less time doing that. But kind of my end to the card service was actually Google Chat and writing chatbots. And the description of chat widgets in Google Chat is JSON objects, and it's so verbose. You really need a visual tool, or you're just spending as long as you would writing HTML. So I would definitely give 2 thumbs up to getting some visual tools that we can use to build develop card service.
Absolutely. With the time left, a great segue there. You also mentioned writing JSON. So also introduced in 2020, not officially 100% shipped, but also in the same vein, the ability to build add-ons with alternate runtimes. In other words, I can use my own stack, my own dev tools, my own environment to actually run my add-ons, and all I have to do is provide some JSON to make that work. So I don't have to use Apps Script. It frees me away from kind of that, I don't want to say burden, wrong words, but it frees me away from the ability to be requiring that, so I can write my code in one place, source it in one place, produce it in one place, and then we have this capability of running it within our backend environment by ingesting your JSON. So again, you probably heard that announcement. I know Steve Basil, who's actually chiming in and watching, is also going to be doing a series at one of our developer days shortly about that. And he also did one back last year on the term alternate runtime. So check that out if you're not necessarily an Apps Script expert or you're interested in building sans Apps Script. We're making that available and viable so you can build add-ons within your core offerings in your core stack as well too. So that's a good one. So a couple other things I just want to shout out that happened last year that are worthwhile talking about while we have some time left. I think they're super interesting. And Romain, you mentioned it a little bit, is the ability to do add-ons in different places. So we introduced the Gmail add-on a while ago. Actually, I think it was before 2020, but as a whole, as part of the platform in 2020, back in January. But since then, we've added a couple of other features that I think are super neat. Wanted to see if anybody here is playing with them or talking about them. One is the Gmail compose time functions, and one is the Gmail send time functions. And so for folks not familiar with those, the ability to build an add-on in Gmail, and for example, to help at compose time, somebody actually ingest data or clean up their text or do something interesting while they're authoring an email before it gets sent out is super awesome for an add-on editor. And then the other one, send time, is I actually can do things when somebody's with my add-on sending out an email. Maybe I need to put a disclaimer in it or actually write it through some sort of a content management solution, or maybe my legal team needs to review it. You can write a solution that allows you to do something with a mail on send. And again, all part of new functionality added around Gmail add-ons. Anybody here play with those, look at those, or have a use case they like about those?
I saw the announcement. I have not got time or had time to play with them, but I can definitely see how there could be lots of lovely little juicy bits and pieces that we could do with those.
Yeah, I think there's some great use cases, especially when you sit and think about them. I can tell you those features were actually demands made by some high-end customers, enterprise customers, large customers that were interested in really getting a handle on their email environments in different ways and adding functionality. I think they're going to be interesting when they're fully adopted and more folks do it. So take a look at those. So wrapping up the year, just at the very end of the year, we announced something called the Macro Converter. I don't know if any folks out there come from a Microsoft Office background or work with any customers that have existing Office automations, but this tool is kind of neat because it allows you to go out and take Office files, triage them to figure out which ones may not convert neatly into a Google Workspace environment, and actually identify which ones have any VBA macros, and then change that content into Apps Script code so that automation can continue to run. Now, of course, this won't work for every single solution and every single line of VBA out there, but one thing the team worked hard on is getting that 80-20 rule, getting a lot of use cases to easily translate over so you can migrate someone over to Workspace, or you can work with teams in multiple different formats. Maybe some folks are using Office, maybe some folks are using Workspace, maybe you want them to work together or have the same automation experience. The converter will help you do that faster, better, stronger, wiser, smarter. Any folks here? And again, just at the end of the year, the announcement was just made. I believe it was like the 10th or 17th. So we just squeaked it into 2020. But does anybody here play with that or looked at it?
Yeah, I have looked at it, and some folks on my team have as well. It kind of like you laid out. It can get you maybe sometimes 100% or 80% there. And I think what that might end up doing, Charles, is increase the amount of people starting to use Apps Script, to be learning more about Apps Script. Because if they're making that conversion from Microsoft over, they may see Apps Script for the first time. So you may see an increase.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
It's a bit of insight to viewers. So GDE's got a preview of the macro converter, and we're also diehard Google Sheets users. When we ask, does anyone use Excel VBA? Or it's like, I think he does. I think that's the issue for us. We're, I think Steve is perhaps slightly unique in the fact that he's got customers that he can perhaps support.
He's unique probably in today's time, but for example, there are a lot of folks. Obviously, Office still has a very strong presence. One of my favorite tools, because if folks don't know my background from prior to Google the show, I actually worked for Microsoft and I wrote a lot of VBA. And one of the great resources was Bruce McPherson's book, Going Gas, on how do you actually move over. And it was the way I actually learned Apps Script but I had to learn it by reading Bruce's book, a phenomenal book. But now with a tool like this, I think it'll make it a lot easier for folks who still buy Bruce's book, by the way, but you don't have the opportunity or don't have the need or desire to go through and learn it all. So you're right. A lot of us haven't done it because it's been a while. But there's still a lot of customers out there that want to make that.
I think there are 5 billion Excel users out there. So I think 1 or 2 will be wanting to go gas.
Yeah. And I know folks like Ben Collins, who's another GD. He does a lot with Excel and with Sheets. He sees uses for it going back and forth. So again, I have to shout out to the team that built it, and I think it's awesome. I think it's going to be helpful for folks to kind of embrace our world a little sooner a little easier, a little faster. With that, I'm going to apologize. I talked too much, but it's now 2021. Good talk. I think 2020 was great. Quick round robin as we sign off. What are you hoping for in 2021? What would you like to see? Where do you want to go? And also, folks listening in, if you have any episodes you're interested in, I know next week we're going to actually talk about dynamic email, AMP for email. John Harmer and Steve Basil are going to join us, and we'll talk about great things you can do there. If you haven't done it, you definitely should take a look at that episode. But anybody else, what do you hope for 2021? Anyone?
Just learning more and looking forward to traveling in sometime in 2021.
Yeah. So I think stack ranking in order: a vaccine, prosperity, and source code manager for Apps Script, right? Somewhere like that.
I think we've. So as Charles mentioned, this is us back for the second half of our third season. So we're looking for your ideas in terms of shows. So as Charles mentioned, we've got the Amped episode coming up next. And then we're hoping to put something together for all you edu users out there. So stay tuned for more information on that. But I wonder, Romain or Scott, Scott, you've mentioned you'd like another add-ons shows, or anything else, Scott, you'd like us to cover? Just more.
No, that's it. I think we're starting to lose connection. I think the kangaroos are bouncing around and messing up the Wi-Fi around here.
What about you, Romain? Is there any hot topics or tricky topics or things?
Well, I think it will be interesting to discuss a bit more the new IDE. I think it's not yet available to all. Or maybe it is, I don't remember. But it will be interesting to maybe share some quick tips during the next episodes, because, a lot of things is hidden. And yeah, it's very nice to be able to show some of the quick wins you can get with this new IDE. And after that, I have some add-ons in the work, and I will be pleased to talk about how to build new add-ons in.
That's when you ship, we'd love to have you back. You can do the anatomy of an add-on, and you can show us, and you can talk to us, and you can bring it out there, because I know you've done as many add-ons as anybody, and you know it as good as anybody, and we'd love to hear from you. So again, thanks to everybody for attending. Olaf for stopping in. Scott coming from an RV in Australia, and Romain has a brand new baby, 10 feet away. Thanks, guys. Thanks, community. Thanks, hosts. 2020 was great. I look forward to 2021 myself. So,
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Be back next week, same time, same place ish, and we'll be putting up resources, and this will get distributed as a podcast as well. So in the meantime, everyone, happy scripting.